Good morning and welcome to the Daily Cyber Briefing for Thursday the 29th of May. I'm Stephen Ridgway. All right, quite a lot to get through this morning. So for the details of these various articles, please see the links attached to the briefing. Which will then link out to further information as and when. But I'll run through this stuff, hopefully not taking up too much time. So there are over 100,000 WordPress sites at risk from a vulnerability in a Wishlist plugin. The vulnerability has got a CVSS score of 10.0, so trivial to exploit. And leading to full system compromise. The CVE for that is 2025 at 47577. It affects all versions of the TI WooCommerce Wishlist plugin, up to and including version 2.9.2. Currently, there is no patch available, so if you are using that particular Wishlist plugin, WooCommerce Wishlist plugin, keep an eye out for patches as they become available. In the meantime, it is worth looking at what you can do in the way of mitigations. Are wish lists absolutely critical for your site? They might be if it's e-commerce, for example. That may well be absolutely core to what is your particular business model with that particular site, whatever it may be. It is at the moment there are, as far as I can see, there are no easy mitigations in place. However, I am fingers crossed that a patch will be made available relatively quickly. Version 2.9.2 was released at the end of November last year. Not sure exactly how long this vulnerability has been. I haven't looked at the release date for the CVE yet this morning. However, definitely one to be aware of, definitely one to, at the very least, put some enhanced visibility around. Okay, there is a new botnet made up of over 9,000 compromised ASUS routers. Part of the botnet is maintained by adding a persistent SSH backdoor. The botnet is being tracked as AyySSHush, AYYSSHush. So yeah, play on ASUS, but there we are. If you are using, I'll just let me check in the article for which versions of this. So payloads have been seen for ASUS RT, AC 3100 and 3200 routers with out-of-the-box configurations. So there is a good article in Security Affairs that talks in a little more detail around what's going on here. It is a very stealthy botnet. Whilst compromised routers have been found, the actual traffic around what they're doing remains a little bit more difficult to understand. So if you are using those routers, check for updates, check for indicators of compromise. You clearly don't want your devices to be part of a botnet. Now, an interesting feature of malware attacks is often how command and control is established back to the malware. So yes, depending on what you're trying to do, but generally, malware is trying to do something that includes data exfiltration, or after initial compromise, provide remote access, backdoors, rats, these sorts of whatever it might be. But in some way, this stuff needs coordinating. Well, one of the ways that that's done is through having command and control servers. I'll get through the industry, you know this already, but the malware then normally will periodically then check in with the command and control server to see if there are commands to run things to do. Well, as an interesting twist on C2, there is a sophisticated malware campaign that has been seen to be using Google Calendar events as C2 servers. Now, you think, how on earth would that work? Well, the way that this works is by creating 0-minute events at specific times and dates in a Google Calendar, and then as part of the description of the event, you can put encrypted or obfuscated code which contains the commands. Malware is then configured to go and read that from the Google Calendar. Now, obviously, because it's a 0-minute calendar event, it doesn't really flag up anywhere. So, excuse me. So, there is little that is done in order to try and catch this stuff. So, it's very clever. And also, outbound connections to Google Calendar, I suppose, by default, is unlikely to trigger any security visibility or alerting or event. So it's unlikely to trigger an event that might actually further trigger an alert in the security visibility tool. Yeah, your security visibility tool. Good article in GB Hackers that delves into some of this. There are a handful of indicators of compromise for the particular campaign that's been seen to be doing this, which is definitely worth having a look at. However, it is something, I think it is something to be aware of at a more general level, rather than specifically for this this campaign. And it's something I hadn't thought of, to be honest. So if I hadn't thought of it, I'm sure, I may be at the in the slow queue, as it were. So I might, everybody else may have picked up on this prior to me, but I suspect there are people out there that haven't thought about this. If you haven't put any thought into visibility around this stuff, then I would obviously suggest you have a little read of the article and see whether there is something both specifically around this campaign, malware campaign, or more generically around the use of calendar events as C2 for delivering C2 instructions, and see what can be done about it. Okay, there is a critical OneDrive flaw that lets malicious websites access all OneDrive files. It is based around poor scoping of OAuth controls. So, right, if you've got a web app that you need to, or you want to use to upload or download files from OneDrive, the app uses OAuth to authenticate or well, you effectively you, but the app via OAuth gets authentication on OneDrive to give you permissions to upload or download the file. So far, so normal. What it has not been, I think, clear, or certainly not well understood, is that OneDrive's file picker uses overly broad OAuth scopes. So effectively, you can find yourself granting access to all of a user's OneDrive files via the third-party app, rather than the specific file, which is the one that you're trying to, say, upload or download. Google, as an alternative, uses file-level OAuth scopes. So you can it's much more granular around how what the permissions are that you're granting to the app. But yeah, if you're using OneDrive, effectively the web app that you're using needs to get access to OneDrive, uses OneDrive file picker, which then grants access to the whole OneDrive for that particular user. There is a follow-on vulnerability that the latest OneDrive picker, which is version 8.0, I think, developers have to handle authentication using the Microsoft Authentication Library, and that library stores access tokens in a browser's session storage as plain text, which means that they're stealable. Of course, this is a bit of a mess. So mitigations at the moment, well, for individual users, it's definitely worth reviewing which apps have access to OneDrive via Microsoft account privacy settings. So have a look in your OneDrive Microsoft account privacy settings to see which apps you've granted access to, and revoke any access for unfamiliar or unnecessary apps. Heightened caution around granting permissions through OAuth consent screens, and being clear that it's the app that's requesting the access. It's not controlled at the other end. So, sorry. Some apps will specifically ask for permissions to, in a very granular way. That's fine. But other apps will simply say, want access to everything. And if you authenticate, basically the OAuth scope is then set by the app. It's not set by the OneDrive side. If for organizations, it is worth looking at the Entra Admin Center and audit enterprise applications and their permissions. You can enforce admin consent and monitoring API and CASB logs for anomalous OneDrive access patterns will give you some indications of what's going on. So certainly something to be aware of. Definitely if you're using Microsoft's collaboration suite and you use OneDrive, definitely worth having a read of this. The article in GB Hackers, as often the case actually, is a very good overview of what's going on, with links out to deep dive if you need to. So yeah, keep an eye on that one. Okay, yeah, more stuff. Right, so off the back of, there seems to be at the moment a very much seems to be a targeted campaign against retail organisations in the UK, and which has been seen to be spreading out to the US as well. So I think Marks and Spencer's, Co-op, Harrods have all hit the headlines recently. Well, Victoria's Secret has also been hit. So if I mean, firstly, obviously the website appears to be down. It was still down this morning, as far as I could see. It is unclear. It has been confirmed as a security incident. It is unclear whether it's ransomware at the moment. There's not much in the way of detailed information. It is also unclear whether it's the same particular group or an affiliated group, or whether this is just coincidence. However, it does seem to be that if you are working in retail certainly in the UK and possibly increasingly in the US, there you are very much seen as a target. So hopefully risk assessments are being done and protections are being put in place. So bring it to your attention, just because if we thought that the attacks on retail sites and retail organisations have gone away, they don't seem to have. Right, China. In China, a Chinese telecom company has claimed to have launched the world's first unhackable quantum-based communications network. So we've spoken quite a lot, in fact, over the last year or so around the potential challenges that quantum computing will bring to conventional networks, effectively rendering traditional encryption valueless. Again, quick reminder, the value lifetime of an encrypted piece of data needs to have reached zero faster than the decryption, faster than it takes to decrypt the data if you are not supposed to be able to do, if you don't have you don't already have the keys, kind of thing. So a very ineloquently way of saying basically all encryption is breakable. It takes a certain amount of time to break encryption. From the slowest possible way is just to brute force it, and then there are various other ways you can look for weaknesses in algorithms. You can look for rainbow table type stuff. There's various ways you can get around breaking encryption, but all encryption is breakable at some point. You're relying on the fact that your encrypted data has got, or your encrypted information has got no value, defined value in whatever way is appropriate to your business, but it has got no value before it would be possible for an attacker to access that by, in one way or another, breaking the encryption. Quantum computing massively changes that landscape, because we're moving from it taking hours, days, months, years, millennia to break traditional encryption, down to using quantum computing. You can break it in the blink of an eye. Consequently, there's a lot of work being done in places, and China is very much at the forefront of this stuff. Whether they're developing it themselves or nicking it all off the Americans is an interesting question, but they do appear to be very much at the forefront of looking into these things. And this is the first instance that I've come across of a telecoms network which is using quantum methodology in order to do the encryption, which renders, they say it's unbreakable. Well, it's currently unbreakable to all practical intents and purposes. But there was a time when DES or encryption, or triple DES encryption, or whatever, was considered totally unbreakable. So you know what I mean. It will be broken, but at the moment it isn't. They use a quantum-based method that sends encryption keys using effectively using quantum physics, which makes them functionally impossible to steal or intercept. And they've layered with that a mathematical model that's been designed to be difficult for quantum computers to solve. So two-layer approach basically means it's probably the most secure. If this is true, make it probably the most secure telecoms network that is available in the world at the moment. There are various. It is commercially available. It's being used on a large scale. 16 cities, including Beijing and Shanghai, do appear to be using this particular thing. So definitely something to be aware of. And if you haven't got a quantum, excuse me, terrible. If you don't have a quantum policy, you should consider one as soon as you can. All right, that's all from me for